everyone. Welcome to our final roundtable on systemic racism, poverty, disability, rights, and legislation. We've been doing these roundtables for all the federal candidates that are running in the 44th election. So we started last week, and today is our final roundtable. Today we have the Liberal candidate and the NDP candidate. They confirmed their participation. The other candidates, we did send them an invitation, the Conservative candidate and the Green candidate, but didn't hear back from them. The NDP candidate is momentarily going to join. We wanted to make sure that we respect people's time. So that's why you are not seeing the NDP candidate, but they should be joining shortly. We have a limited time today, and we'd like to start by saying that we are on indigenous land. This is a land that is governed by the dish with one spoon, and the dish with one spoon says that we need to take what we can and leave some for future generations. So as we continue to stay on this land, that is the philosophy that we should apply. That is the philosophy that we should try to live by. In terms of things that you can do to address indigenous issues here in Hamilton, the city of Hamilton has an urban indigenous strategy that you can read. You can go to the city's website and type urban indigenous strategies, and it outlines about 40 recommendations that the city and Hamilton residents can partake in to ensure that indigenous rights and indigenous and reconciliation is something that is centered. There is also the Yellowhead Institute that also talks about indigenous rights and indigenous issues across what we call Canada. You can check out their website, yellowheadinstitute.ca. They do lots of research, release policy papers, and whatnot. So those are things that you can commit to doing to ensure that you are educated and know about the various indigenous issues that are happening here in what we call Hamilton and Canada. So while we wait for Lauren Newick, the NDP candidate, what we decided to do is we have Ahona Medi, who is with the Hamilton Students for Justice, a grassroots organization that is led by and is made up of students from high school to university to college, and they get together to talk about issues that affect them in schools, whether it's all the publicly funded school boards and publicly funded post-secondary institutions. So Ahona is actually a first-time voter, and we we hardly hear from first-time voters and the youth when we are engaged in federal elections. So then we're going to hand it over to Ahona, who has some questions for the Liberal candidate, and the Liberal candidate is Vito. So we'll pass it over to Ahona.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Vito, for being here. It's an honor to be here, and yeah, I'm really happy to be here on behalf of Hamilton Students for Justice. These issues are really important to us, and it's great to be here again. So yeah, I'll just jump right into the questions. I guess that's what we're here for. But yeah, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen increased mental health crises. We've seen suicide attempts. We've seen suicide across what we call Canada, and Black, Indigenous, and racialized, and LGBTQ plus, and disabled, and minoritized communities are bearing the brunt of this and are disproportionately impacted by this, as has always been the case, even prior to the pandemic. And I, as a student, have seen this firsthand, and youth are bearing the brunt of a lot of these struggles. So my question to both of you is, what is your plan as a candidate to combat mental health and addiction crises municipally within Hamilton, and federally as an elected official? And whoever would like to start.
I'm sorry, Ahona. I heard the first part. I didn't hear the second part. I heard, what are your plans for? I apologize.
Okay, of course. I can just repeat the question.
Please.
Yeah. So my question is, what's your plan as a Flamborough-Glanbrook candidate to combat mental health and addiction crises municipally within Hamilton and federally as an elected official?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. As you know, this has been 18 months of a very terrible, terrible year where I know every family I've met, including my own, has had issues with predominantly younger people with mental health issues. Our plan calls for about $2.5–3 billion going forward towards mental health. We want to hire 1,200 counselors that would be a part of the university system to deal with students who have mental health issues. Going forward with that, there's a mental health $3 billion for the Indigenous communities, where we would work with Indigenous groups directly. They will administer it, and we, of course, will fund and help for mental health going forward. A lot of this stems from the things that were wrong before the pandemic. A lack of housing security, the opioid crisis. I know a lot of people I'm retired now, but in my practice, I had a lot of clients who were mental health workers, doctors and so forth. They said the biggest problem is if someone doesn't have a housing security, it's tough for them to deal with mental health, with getting a job, with school, with everything else. We do have a housing program because in Hamilton, unfortunately, we have some of the highest homeless problems. It's a distinction that is disgraceful, and it's not something we should be proud of. Obviously, we have to fix. But we have a housing plan to get people into housing. There's a rent to own. We want to build 1.4 million homes across Canada, working with the cities. That could be part of renovation of houses, creation of new houses, and so forth. In terms of medical, again, $2 to $3 billion for mental health. We want to hire 7,500 new nurse practitioners, mental health practitioners, doctors going forward. We want to get not just in Hamilton, the core, for example, but there are issues in the rural areas of Flamborough-Glanbrook where they're underutilized also in terms of healthcare. I don't think a lot of people realize there is a problem with poverty also out in that area. They don't have access to the medical professionals they need. We need to fix that. We're going to lower student debt for medical professionals who set up in these rural areas. We don't even have a simple system like Wi-Fi in a lot of those areas. We've got to get that straightened out. So we do have an extensive plan with mental health for everyone, for Indigenous peoples and so forth going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Lauren who's joined. Lauren, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine. Yes.
Okay.
You're saying that you're experiencing some kind of interference or feedback.
Yeah, it's better now. It's better now.
I just turned the volume down a bit. I don't know if that's the.
Yes, it's perfect. Don't touch anything.
Okay.
It's perfect.
Not broken, fix it, right?
Yeah.
So sorry, everybody. My apologies. I came in. I got caught in traffic on my way home from Waterdown, and then I set up in front of my computer, and I couldn't locate the link to get on the meeting here. So my apologies for my tardiness and holding things up a little bit. I hope I didn't cause too much damage.
Better late than never. You're here.
Yes,
so did you hear Ahona's question?
I did. I wouldn't mind if she would just repeat it, because I was just sort of getting set up here. So
okay, Ahona.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So my question to you is, what's your plan as a Flamborough-Glanbrook candidate to combat mental health crises and addiction crises municipally within Hamilton and federally as an MP?
So the NDP, they do have, as you know, they've been pushing for some time to expand our universal health care nationwide to include, Pharmacare, dental care and access to mental health if necessary. So, we're looking at, obviously a national attack to deal with, mental health issues, in Canadians, especially Canadian youth. And I think Vito touched on a little bit, what has happened over the last, 18 or 20 months, with the isolation that people have experienced, and the separation and just access to overall health facilities, whether it's going and seeing your family doctor, your dentist, it doesn't matter. Everything has become very, very cumbersome, as a result of COVID. So, hopefully, we're on the right track to get things moving. I know access is getting better all the time, but it's always been a problem locally and nationally, I think, to get the mental health care that people need. Typically it's not covered under like a lot of the provincial plans. They all sort of piecemeal things out. And, unless you're actually admitted, into a facility in Ontario, and I have some experience with this. One of my family members, ended up, having some issues, mental health issues, and they were taken care of once they were in a facility and checked in. And it was here in Hamilton, as a matter of fact, one of the better ones in the country, I think. But once they left that facility, they were sort of on their own. As far as the medications and stuff like that, they managed themselves. And as long as they had family support there to help them along with that, and make sure that that they were medicating properly, and that they were making appointments that were booked and stuff like that, they were fine. But unfortunately, our society, not everybody has that luxury of having a good support system around them. So I think obviously including this type of care into our national health care plan is certainly going to make things easier for those individuals that need the help and medications as well. I mean, a lot of people have struggle trying to afford medication. It's if you don't have a group plan or something to support you in that, a lot of people just can't afford it, and that unfortunately takes a second seat to their paying their rent or their grocery bill. So many problems, but the NDP certainly recognize them, and they're willing to tackle them through our national healthcare plan primarily.
If I may, I agree with a lot of what Lauren's saying. A lot of the problem is the stigma of that. For example, the opioid crisis. We've spent $600 million over the last 2 years. I'll get that. $600 million on the opioid crisis to improve treatment. We're going to spend another $25 million just to deal with the public education to reduce the stigma of that. Mental health is health, and the sooner we get to the point where it's a health issue, it's not some mental health type of thing, the faster we'll get to alleviate these problems. I agree with a lot of what Lauren has said. I know that the federal government has signed an agreement with PEI to start a Pharmacare system there. It's a pilot process that hopefully will go very well. And I agree with Lauren where we need to have this nationwide. I agree with that 100%.
So Ahona, do you have a next question for the candidates?
Yeah, I had a couple more questions, but I actually have a follow-up to that question, like kind of based on your answers. So Lauren, you said that, the NDP is committed to providing universal pharmacare. And I know, like Vito, you said there's like a certain amount of money that's being allocated. I think you said 2.3 million to mental health services, billion, yes, to mental health services.
Right.
And I think like when we talk about these things, oftentimes politicians will say, it takes time for these things to be implemented. It takes a certain amount of time. We need some time to implement universal pharmacare, or we are going to implement this within the next few years. But when we're talking about students, for example, the students that Hamilton Students for Justice is working for, or the youth that I work with, oftentimes there is no time, right? This is a matter of their immediate health, and it's a matter of sometimes life and death for them. And this is a huge thing when it comes to mental health. Sometimes youth.
Oh no.
Yeah, froze up.
Oh, you're back.
You're back. You froze up.
Okay, yeah. So I was just saying, a lot of the time, students and youth don't have the time or the accessibility to kind of wait for these things to be there for them and be accessible to them. And so what I'm wondering is do you have a commitment to providing universal pharmacare? And I guess you guys have mentioned that, and free mental health services for youth and people in this country. And if not, what's your plan to ensure that these crucial steps are prioritized? Because I just think sometimes these things need to be more immediate in order to actually save lives.
Can I?
We'll let Lauren start
Sure.
first, and then Vito, you can go next.
Sure.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. When governments promise things that they're going to implement certain things, through platform promises and election cycles, and we've heard it. We've heard it from previous governments. That things were going to be done. Pharmacare was a big one. It was actually, Vito would know, everybody knows it, in 2015, and a majority government for 4 years to get it done. So again, I'm not going to comment too much on that. I don't think there's much value in that. We have a short timeline here, but when people need help, they need it now. I mean, it's not, you're absolutely right. People can't, if somebody has some kind of a breakdown of a sort, or they're maybe they're depressed. Students, they have a huge workload on them, academically and socially as well. And it's much harder these days than it was 2 years ago. They just don't have the the same peer support that they're used to. I have two kids that are, they're both doing post-secondary education, and they're homeschooling all last year, and they're starting off again this year. So in that, you lose all your peer supports, where you can, I think, like we do so often in life, we tap into one another's, I guess your personality, your social graces, and you manage to use that to your advantage. And sometimes you get through a certain crisis in your lifetime through having that closeness with your peers. Again, that's not the case these days. I think I'm going to be honest. I don't know what the answers are, other than just having, maybe more. I know that there's some of the schools are offering help on the campuses. There's access to professionals on campuses that students can access, if they're in need. But outside of that, I think that we just have to hold governments accountable. If they're going to deliver, we have to hold them accountable to that. And I know that the NDP, if ever given the opportunity, it would be a priority on their mandate.
Okay, Vito.
So thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Kojo. So we are, in our parts of our platform, the 1,200 counselors needed for predominantly post-secondary education that is definitely needed for students, especially in the last 18 months. We are continuing to fund Jordan's Principle as part of our reconciliation for Indigenous peoples. For the people who don't know, Jordan's Principle is basically, it doesn't matter who's going to pay for what, where, and when. A child in the Indigenous community will get the care, either medical, mental, whatever, immediately, so that it doesn't fall through the cracks. Along with Joyce's Principle, We are funding. We already are funding those programs. We're going to continue to fund those programs. And Lauren's right. You can't do it fast enough. I wish our other friends who are candidates of the other parties would be here to discuss their plans, because I don't think they have a plan. We have a plan to spend billions of dollars in the next couple of years to get this going quickly. I know the NDP has a plan to do the same thing, maybe a little different, but I think we both can agree tomorrow is not soon enough to have this done. And I'll be working towards that myself.
Okay. Ahona, your next question.
Yeah, for sure. So my next question to candidates is about reconciliation and over-policing. I'm going to jump right into it. We know that like the RCMP and Canadian policing in general were established to uphold structures of white supremacy on this land. And as thousands of unmarked graves of Indigenous children continue to be uncovered, like we as a collective need to acknowledge that the RCMP are directly responsible for taking Indigenous children from their families and putting them into residential institutions where they were traumatized, exploited, murdered. And today we know that Indigenous communities are also disproportionately policed. Even in schools, like recently Hamilton Students for Justice worked on terminating the police program in the HWDSB, and we heard from countless Indigenous students talking about how they were being over-policed in schools, which kind of manifests in the school-to-prison pipeline, which manifests in over-incarceration of Indigenous communities. So when we're looking at these issues, what are you as a candidate, on behalf of your party as well, going to do to work towards reconciliation? And considering that, federally, the federal government is responsible for a certain amount of money that goes towards the RCMP, what is your commitment to defunding the RCMP and reinvesting in Indigenous communities and Indigenous education, if that's even in place?
You want me to go first, or
no?
Vito?
We'll go with Vito, because
Sure.
I'm doing the trading. Yes, so
Sure,
Vito gets to start.
Okay, fair enough. First, we must acknowledge the tragic legacy of colonialism, continue to address these difficult issues, and honor the communities and survivors who have faced these awful injustices. We've got to recognize and confront the legacy and the horror of the residential schools. It's unbelievable to me when I heard that people's children were taken away from them. I can't, to a lot of people, they just can't fathom that. Our government is committed to continue the path of reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples by bridging gaps in housing, including Indigenous-led mental health and wellness services. We're going to continue funding Jordan's principle, Joyce's principle. We're going to take action to confront systemic racism against Indigenous peoples, especially in the justice system and healthcare. We're going to give $2 billion towards housing, create 3,300 spaces for childcare. Mental health is very, very important. I believe it was June of this year that UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, was given royal assent in Canada, and every ministry's letters will have to reference back to this, which creates a system of self-government, recognizing the injustices and corrections of things like policing, like justice, like medical, like access to school and drinking water and so forth. On drinking water, we've spent billions of dollars on 550 projects to provide clean drinking water. We've taken 109 high-level drinking water alerts off the system, but there's a lot more work left to do.
Lauren?
So on this, there was it's ongoing, I guess, the investigation into the grave sites, and there was a reconciliation report commission that was established to investigate, and there were I think 97 points in that commission report on where reconciliation should begin, how it should be handled, and how it's going to be undertaken. Obviously, I know Mr. Singh has had meetings with Indigenous groups across the country, and he recognizes the crisis that they're currently facing and have been facing for decades. And it's time to have some truthful and honest and meaningful steps taken to include Indigenous leaders in the decision making. Our federal policies and provincial as well, but I guess it would fall more under a federal jurisdiction. But I think that they're really, really underrepresented in most levels of government, and until we're prepared to open those doors and have those people from those communities sitting at the table and having their input and their recommendations, we're going to keep struggling, and as a result, they are going to continue to struggle, and it's just so wrong in so many ways. I mean, Canada is is known worldwide as a country with a great record of helping people, cultures and races, countries pull themselves out of difficult and really tough situations. And here in our own backyard, we've got our Indigenous people are struggling and have been struggling for as Vito said since the colonization of the country over 100 years ago, over 150 years ago. So as far as the defunding the RCMP, I'm not sure how that would work. I mean, the RCMP now, they play a very small role, I think, in Indigenous affairs. I mean, I know even when there's active protests going on, I've seen them in our area. We've all seen them in our area, the Six Nations, and they're there to, it's basically their role is very minimalized. It's more the provincial police that are doing any of the security and control in those situations. But again, the defunding of police is something that's really come to light in the last 5 to 10 years. I think that changing the way that we train our people out there that are doing the policing, I think that's probably where the money should be spent, is to change up their role in society, and the ways that they're upholding, or they're appointed or hired to uphold the law of the land. I think it has to be reviewed, and their tactics and their policies have to be reviewed. And I think that if there's any defunding, then I think that funding should go into people that can sit and sift through that and get some things out in the open that are going to benefit everybody, including the police forces.
May I speak? So, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Along those lines, also, I know that this government's committed to continue supporting the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, not only with a physical structure in Ottawa, but to continue the work they're doing on issues like that, recognizing that Black Canadians and Indigenous peoples, more often than not, have suffered fatal encounters with RCMP, and that has to be dealt with. And I support, our government does support looking into that and dealing with how we fix that, make that better. So I agree with a lot of what Lauren was saying.
And just to add, sorry, Koja, just something that came to mind. I think back to our history lessons in school. They didn't talk a lot about this stuff. But there was other tragedies that happened, in Canada with other races, and I think back to the Second World War, when Japan got engaged, on the west coast of Canada. The Japanese citizens were rounded up, and they were taken inland and basically held in camps. They were taken away from their homes in the lower part of British Columbia, Vancouver, greater Vancouver area. And they weren't treated as prisoners of war, but they weren't treated very well. And I think even some of the Italian population, once Mussolini and Hitler started working together in certain tactics, it led to targeting Italians on Canadian soil. So those are things that there were drastic times, and maybe those measures were somewhat justifiable to people of the day, but it's all things like that we have to, I think we have to educate, Canadian youth. So, when you're, 30 or 40 years old and you hear about residential schools and what part they've played in Canada's history, it doesn't come as a surprise. You should be, this stuff should be part of our history. You can't just sort of chop it up and talk about the, half of it and not tell the whole story, because Canada's history is, it is tainted in some ways. And, hopefully people are learning from that. Hopefully people are changing course on the way Canada treats
everyone,
refugees, well, everybody, every Canadian citizen, regardless of race, religion. It shouldn't matter. I think we're getting there. I think it's getting better in a lot of ways, but I see there's room for improvement for sure.
I think if I can. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. We have limited time. There's one more question. No, okay. It's okay. There's one more question. Ahona, if you give me the leeway to ask one more question, then we'll come back to you. And this question, for folks in Hamilton, this has become a reality, right? So over the last several years, we've seen hate proliferate online, on social media, allowing hate groups such as the Proud Boys, Soldiers of Odin, and whatnot to share bigotry, malice, and attack on various racialized communities and populations. And this has led to, if you remember, there was a hate crime incident in Ancaster. We saw what happened in London. We see what happened in Quebec City. And so for each of you, what is the plan to tackle this pervasive and persistent issue of hate that seems to be bubbling, not just south of the border, and we saw what happened on January 6th in the States, but also here in Canada, and particularly we're seeing that bubble again during this campaign with what happened with candidates in Niagara, in other sections of the country, and even to the extent where gravel is being thrown on a leader of a federal party, and even the last time, other federal parties also facing this type of hate. So again, what is your respective party going to do to address this hate issue? So I think we start with Lauren here, and then we'll go to Vito.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kojo. This is especially in the last decade, I would think it's become a lot more highlighted, I guess, in Hamilton. Hamilton at one point was rated as one of the highest rated cities in the country for hate crimes, and that wasn't long ago. I think that was like a story I read about 2 years ago, and and I think it all sort of tied in with the government in the States. I think that when Trump was given the opportunity to form a government, just his overall, the man's a racist as far as I'm concerned. I believe that truly, but he in the way he talked to people and his demographic of support, his actions opened the door, it seems, in a lot of ways, and it was online. It was, it was boots on the ground. It was really, full-on hatred and racism on the streets, and we've seen it. And I think that just ebbed up into north of the 49th parallel, and we started seeing a huge rise up here. And you noted some of the more atrocious things that have happened in and around Hamilton and Ontario. So the NDP, I know that they are going to invest heavily in combating online hate crimes and white supremacy. They want to form a hate-based database that they can actually track and follow. I'm thinking probably groups or sects of people that are promoting hatred and racism in our society, whether it's online or boots on the ground type stuff. But it's obviously, I think the majority of people think it's intolerable, and but there's a small portion out there that are very radical, and we need to combat that. And I'm not sure exactly what steps and who would be involved, whether that would be part of a policing effort. Or maybe it might even have to go higher. It might be like a CSIS driven thing, where our Secret Service, if you will, they get involved at a higher level and track stuff online. I think that's where you got to really sort of nip it. There's so much that can be put out there, and it's not really vetted most of the time. And there's websites out there that I think there's no place for them in our society, at least certainly not in mine.
Vito?
Before I get into that, I had the opportunity to volunteer in the U.S. presidential election in 2016 for the Clinton campaign. I saw firsthand the horror of what was happening. It's happening here, but not to the great extent yet, and I hope it never does, because it is shocking and disgusting. I think Lauren's gone through this. My signs have been spray painted with the word fascist and Nazi and so forth from people who don't understand what those terms mean. Getting to your question, Kojo, the Liberal government has banned groups like the Proud Boys. Liberal MP Iqra Khalid has introduced a private members bill, an anti-Islamophobia bill. Since 2015, we've banned assault weapons. We came up with Canada's first anti-racism strategy. We hosted a national summit on anti-Semitism and a national summit on Islamophobia. We're going to provide funding for communities at risk for hate-motivated crimes to enhance their security, such as mosques, places of worship, schools, and so forth. Going forward, we'll present a national action plan on combating hate by 2022 as part of a renewed anti-racism strategy. Also, there was a bill, I believe, just before Parliament was adjourned on internet hate and what we can do for that. One of the first things we're going to do when government gets back is reintroduce that to make sure they get the powers to stop this garbage on the internet.
Hey, thank you both. We're closing in on the 7 o'clock mark. So what I wanted to do before we let you go is all the roundtables that we did starting last week. We did allow each candidate to tell us exactly what in their own words, what their respective party is going to do to address systemic racism, poverty, and disability rights. And so I wanted to extend that to both of you and you can use that as a final wrap up to the roundtable. So I'll give both of you 3 minutes because I know we have 6 minutes, and so we'll start with Vito, and then we'll end with Lauren, and then Ahona and I will have some last words for those that tuned in tonight. So Vito.
So I'd like to thank HCCI for putting this together. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the issues that matter to most of you and how we can move forward. The challenges that existed before the pandemic remain, and others have been exacerbated, such as poverty, housing, lack of access to health services, and systemic discrimination. We need to commit to tackling these important issues to ensure a just recovery for Hamilton. It's crucial that we work together to provide the platforms for people to share their experiences and advocate for a better life for themselves, their families, and their communities. And there's many different ways towards change, and I strongly believe that we can't do that without everyone being a part of it. I encourage everyone to take a look at our platform. It's very detailed on all issues discussed tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vito. Lauren?
So I don't really have a closing statement. I didn't prepare one, but I will just sort of recap by talking a little bit about some of the bigger items in the NDP platform, and one of them is to address the housing crisis. It's a serious problem for so many Canadians, not only those trying to get into the housing market as first-time home buyers, but it's also a serious problem for people that are renting. We're hearing more and more about the renoviction stuff going on across our city, and people that have been long-term tenants of buildings being pushed out the door, so that the owners can maybe do some renovations, but they bring in new tenants at much higher rates. So stuff like that would certainly be something that we would be getting behind. Shutting that down. It's not right. It's unfair to people, and it's something that we would definitely combat. I guess we talked a bit about the racism and systemic racism and the RCMP as well. I think that there's lots of work to be done in that department. I know that there is a plan with the NDP to attack racism and try and shut down the groups that are spreading hatred and white supremacy in our country.
Thank you very much. Ahona, do you have any final words for all the first-time voters?
Yes. Again, thank you for having me. It was great to be here. First-time voters, go out and vote. It's important. We can't have the youth being like the only people who don't vote and don't have their voice heard. It's important, and your voice matters, and it's the most important thing to do, to vote. So, yeah, thank you for today. It was nice to meet you both.
Yeah, thank you, Ahona.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we sign off, I just want everyone to know, again, we did invite the Conservative candidate and the Green candidate. They were unavailable, so today we had Vito and Lauren with us. Just so people know, for the Flamborough-Glanbrook riding, these are the individuals that are going to be on the ballot. So you have Thomas Hart for the Green Party of Canada, Dan Muse, Conservative Party of Canada, Lauren Newick, New Democratic Party, Bill Pachinsin, People's Party of Canada, and Vito's. Sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
Vito Scroll.
Vito Scroll.
There you go. Thank you.
Liberal Party of Canada. So, election day is September 20th. Please make a plan to go and vote. Would like to thank all the community partners that help with the roundtable. So we have the Afro-Canadian Caribbean Association, we have the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, the City of Hamilton, their Government Relations and Community Initiatives Department. We have the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic, the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, and we have McMaster University School of Social Work, Dr. Emil Joseph, and Hamilton Students for Justice, and HCCI, Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion. So as you can tell, there was a big group of community organizations that came together to have this roundtable. We'd like to say thank you to all of them. And this is just a little piece of providing you with information. I believe there are other all candidates debates that you can have access to. There's Cable 14, and I believe there's also the United, there's some church all candidates as well. So you can find all that information. So thank you all for tuning in. And thank you to Vito and Lauren for making the time to join us to share your party's platform in relation to systemic racism, poverty, disability rights, and legislation. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing us to participate. It's been a good experience. Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night.